I'm Ben. I'm not used to introducing myself as Ben. I've always previously been Cog when I've done stuff for Turn Left, but as we're doing live events and stuff now, I've gone with Ben as my name. And
Is it your real name?
yeah, it is.
It's
Yeah,
just the way you said, "I
very
really need Ben as
nervous.
my name."
Yeah, no, I
Don't
was
worry.
very nervous to like put that out there, but yeah, but that's out there now. I'm very uh, very honored really to be sitting down with Sangita Myska. Like I never thought this would happen. First of all, how are you doing?
Really well. And also, you've nailed the first rule of journalism: flatter to death the person you're about to interview in order just to get them really relaxed, and then you can pounce. Well
It's
done. My real name is
hang on.
Ben. I like it.
I better just like write down pounce somewhere in my notes so that I remember to do it later on. But I've got a couple of questions that I picked up during your keynote speech. It was fantastic. Um, but there was a phrase that I picked up that I was really interested in because you used the phrase journalism is a trade and not a profession. Why do you say that?
I say that because the way to become a journalist is by doing it, not by having a piece of paper. Um, and this isn't to um, disregard all of the very many fantastic master's degrees that are out there. But so you understand a bit about my background, I would not have been able to become a journalist had I not won scholarships and had I not eventually won a BBC traineeship. Um, in fact, I wouldn't have been able to get a higher education had I not, back in the day when they were available, have a full maintenance grant to get into university because my family couldn't afford to support me through higher education. So I come out and I think I really, really, really want to be a journalist. And I trained, I took a typing course and I learned how to become an office assistant. And I would work as an office assistant. And then I would take time out. I'd use that money to pay my rent in a shared house. I would then take weekends and evenings and go and volunteer to work in different places. And then I started applying to universities to do master's courses. And then won 2 scholarships. But then in that same year, win a place on what was then called the BBC News Trainee Scheme. And it was an incredible scheme. You could apply, you did not have to have academic qualifications. There was no upper age limit. They encouraged people who had different careers. They welcomed people who'd had a full state education, like me. Socioeconomic background wasn't important. They just did a set of very, very vigorous testing, and you had to demonstrate that you had done, to the best of your ability, as much journalism as you could do, given your circumstances. They then gave us a small stipend, and we were then farmed out around the country to BBC local radio stations and regional broadcasters, and we learnt the trade. And we learnt the trade from people who had lived and worked in their regions, who understood their patches, and who were, in my case, most of the time, not always, really quite kind. And they allowed us to fail before we were able to succeed, because you never learn anything from your successes. You will always learn from your biggest failures. And I do think, I mean, you probably picked this up. I have a big bee in my bonnet about the elitism of the journalistic world. I think people like me, from my background, child of immigrants, no money, living, my parents, because they came here in the middle of their lives, were most of the time living paycheck to paycheck. It would be very difficult now for someone like me to make it into the media. Why? Because of the number of cuts, because the ending of schemes like the one I was on, because it costs thousands of pounds in debt to get a master's degree. Because if, for example, you want to get onto a traineeship within the big news broadcasters, Sky, ITV, or the BBC, you have to have already ploughed loads of money into getting a master's degree, which you might not have. That automatically precludes people who are lower down the socioeconomic ladder. And those people are not untalented. They just can't afford the qualification to get them the scheme that will then accelerate their careers. That is problematic, and it's creating a situation where only those who can rely on the bank of mum and dad or who have connections can enter journalism. And that means the people who are most likely to question the boss classes are the ones who are essentially locked out. And that's what you want. You want dissenting voices. You want people who have a different perspective. You want people with a lived experience. And I'm really, really worried that that is becoming harder and harder and harder.
You're right, your passion for that does come across. I was going to ask the follow-up question actually. In terms of elitism in journalism, you noted in your speech that you're 3 times more likely to be a journalist if you went to a private school. But why does the idea of meritocracy persist in media and more widely in society, despite the evidence that we don't really live in a meritocratic society?
I would suggest that if you are the group of people who hold the levers of power, the last thing you want to admit is that you may have had advantages bestowed upon you as a result of your connections or your educational background or inherited financial, social, or knowledge capital. That's a really uncomfortable place to be. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that they aren't talented people, but I'm saying know the privileges and advantages that you have, right? As immigrants, who fled, well, we came here because our family was fleeing political and social turmoil in the country where my parents were born, where I was born, where my grandparents had been working from the age of 2021, right? 3 generations of a family, and we had to just move. So then to come to a country and start again, I think it's just given me a really interesting insight into what it is like to be disenfranchised, right? And, ordinarily my family would have been, very comfortable with a comfortable, secure income and a sort of all of the things or some of the things that I've just described. Obviously, there were limits on that because my family was obviously part of, were born and worked and existed within the framework of Britain's colonial empire, right? So there were limits to everything. Um, but I think to answer your question, I think it's really so I can recognize, some of the privilege that I had, right? My dad was a professional. On the other hand, my mother was denied an education from the age of 13 by her father and was treated incredibly shabbily by all the men around her when she tried to equalize her educational capital. So I recognize that I've had some privilege in terms of the ideas that circulated in the house. News was always on. I would say my parents had, putting it kindly, a rather laissez-faire attitude to what we read and watched and saw. Nothing was ever sort of off limits. We were my older brother and sister particularly were encouraged to, in fact, be Labour Party young socialists back in the day. We talked about the politics of the day. One of my earliest memories is being taken on an anti-nuclear campaign. I remember it very well because I remember being in a pram and it being a very hot day. So, all of these things, that's a privilege, right? Being in a household where these ideas are circulating, that's a privilege. I get that. I really get that. One of the few possessions that my parents brought from East Africa were 3 volumes of the Reader's Digest Encyclopedia. These little things matter. They really matter. Because as a kid, as you're flicking through, you might not understand it all, but you see the pictures and you understand the words. And there's possibly someone in the house who, if they have time, can point to something that you might find interesting, right? These are
Mm.
privileges. I own those privileges. But I also know what it's like to be back in the day in a Northwest London state school, well before Tony Blair did that massive cash injection into London schools. My school was adjacent to an absolutely massive council estate on one side and then private housing on the other. It was a genuinely comprehensive experience in that it reflected society, right? And it was a mini crucible of how most people are. And as I said in the speech, I don't like the word higher up, but the further I moved in my career to what is sometimes described, as I said, by my colleague Megan Mohan, as the prime real estate of news, UK, mainstream UK broadcasting, the more I realize there's really very few people around me now that are like me. And therefore, very few people that have my perspective. not just on the news, but on working conditions, on elitism, on institutional bias, on institutionalization, right? And that is an advantage, but it can also feel like a very lonely place to be.
In the book The Authority Gap by Mary Seacart, she uses a metaphor. She says that acknowledging privilege or advantage is often like trying to acknowledge a current in a river. It's like so subtle that often you don't pick it up unless you are being swept down the river, of course, then you tend to be able to see it more. And it's tempting to ignore it. It's always tempting to ignore the privileges that we have, because questioning those privileges can feel like undermining our own sense of where we came from, gets at the core of our identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It gets the core of, do I deserve to be here?
Yeah.
Right? Do I deserve to be here? I think, and now I'm straying into controversial area, given your media outfit, it's called a media for socialism. I do think that when we have these conversations about lived experiences and privilege, it would help if the conversations are a bit more like the one we're having, where we're not weaponizing it. It isn't a stick with which to beat people, but simply to say, this is the framework in which we exist. Okay. We recognize ourselves, we recognize that in others, but how do we then find solutions, and how do we move things on?
Mm.
How do we move on the conversation to something that's tangible and beneficial to everyone?
You mentioned in your speech a lot about the BBC, and how trust in media is at a historic low. Um, Emily Maitlis stated that one of her reasons, more recently stated that one of her reasons for leaving the BBC, but not all of the reason, to be fair to Emily, was the level of to which she felt interfered with by well, she didn't specify, but I presume by the editors. How can the BBC undo the damage that's been done to its impartiality in the past decade? Is there anything that you think could start to shift the narrative back into one where the BBC, which is still a very respectable institution, don't get me wrong, but can start to undo some of the damage that's taken?
Yeah, I obviously have a huge amount of fondness for BBC because I wouldn't have the career I had I not won a place on the BBC News Trainee Scheme, or BBC Training Reporter Scheme as it was called, and benefited from a stipend and them helping pay for my rent and placing me in local and regional newsrooms where I learnt the trade, right? Had it not been for that scheme, which has now ended, I wouldn't have had the huge advantage of the career that I've had, right? Which is at once incredibly hard work, but also delivered for me incredible things in terms of witnessing history and having the ability to influence and change policy and hold politicians to account, that kind of thing. To your question about how can the BBC repair damage to its reputation, listen, it navigates an incredibly difficult and ever-changing course, right? I think it's fair to say that. I think it's very important to see that the BBC is not one huge lump. BBC News isn't one huge lump, actually. When I was there, and I left about 3 years ago now, so there have been changes since. It was very interesting to move from program. I did quite a lot of moving internally, and each program and outlet had its own culture that are broadly under the umbrella of BBC News and Current Affairs. And so a lot of your experience as a journalist are dependent on the team, on the culture within the program, and frankly, the editorial leadership at that point, right? Wherever you are in the building. I think there has clearly been a downturn in trust within the BBC, but as I made the point in my speech, it's not just the BBC.
Hmm.
The figures that I was quoting were worldwide and across all UK media outlets, all of them, right? So as you're asking about the BBC, I actually think what it needs to do is also talk about some of the really good stuff it does. For example, it recognizes unions. The BBC recognizes unions. That is not the case for most private media. And if you have ever been in a situation where you've had to collectively bargain, for example, for improved working conditions or a pay rise, or ensuring that young producers your age are paid more than just the London living wage or below, that's when you realize just how important it is to have to be in a place where unions are recognized and where you can collectively bargain, and where in an environment where the majority of jobs are now short-term contracts and freelancers, where actually your rights are protected. And that is what the BBC in part should start talking about. And it isn't.
Because, as you say, that journalism is a profession that's it's almost it's performativity in the philosophical sense, construction through being by doing, right? And as such, it is really hard to make broad, sweeping comments on journalism or the state of media as a whole. So I do appreciate you trying to answer these big questions, because they are difficult ones, and we're at the Media Democracy Festival, but media democracy is like a huge topic. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of put that in there. Also mentioned during your speech that Gazans indeed are not being treated as individuals by media outlets. I'd argue they're not being treated as individuals by politicians as well.
I'd agree with that.
Yep. And I think this is also true of the LGBT community, particularly the trans community, of course, and of course, women and ethnic minorities, particularly when it comes to statistics to do with violence against women. What I want to know really is, how can our viewers and independent media contributors like us help center minority perspectives in new media to build a better space?
I can only speak for myself, right?
Mm.
I felt that there were points in my career where big news organizations were not prepared to self-reflect and look at the problems that they had with addressing the very issue that you talked about. And once they were forced by the public, I might add, to look at, for example, the demographic makeup of their news presenter lineup, and they were forced, right? None of this happened because the boss classes within established media thought one day, oh, you know what? It's really strange that 16% of the UK population is made up of South Asians, and yet we don't have a single person who is a brown presenter within our 25-person or 50-person presenter lineup. Right? That wasn't something that occurred to them one day. This came entirely from people like you asking questions, the public reacting, and politicians realizing that, oh, maybe we can make a bit of political capital out of this, right? Everybody's got, anybody who holds a lever of power, I would argue, more or less is always looking for the next thing that they can use to either enhance their own influence or capitalize upon it, right? So new media has this incredible opportunity. And I'm really pleased to say I can see it. I can see it changing, and it's palpable, right? Um, and I think you are less constrained by conventional thinking, by I did a lot of talking about how conventional narratives are created in establishment media or mainstream media. I think that you have all realized that online you can get information, vast amounts of information that can channel prevailing narratives that are no longer fit for purpose because of the weight of evidence that's counter to it. And that includes things like ensuring that you have a reasonable reflection within your workforce of not just the general population, but the people whose stories you are telling. There is a value in having a lived experience, and a value in hiring or working with those people that recognize that they have lived experience and aren't embarrassed by it or ashamed of it, right? Why do I say that? Because I would say somebody like Suella Braverman, for example, controversially, I will be someone who will say, actually, it was great to have an ethnic minority woman as the first Home Secretary. Do I think that she militated against that very thing? Do I think the language she used put people who are like her with her lived experience in a really precarious environment? Do I think that she failed to take on board what this lived experience brings in terms of knowledge capital to her policymaking? Yeah, I think she spectacularly failed at all of those things, right? But I also, controversially, do think it is a marker in the sand when there is a chip in that glass ceiling. It is normalized when somebody sees a black person or a brown person, for example, holding the highest states of office. It does matter. And I know I'm going to get a whole load of bleep bleep for that, but that's just where I stand on it. Right.
I love the phrase "chip in the glass ceiling" because I think that sort of like captures the It's not a it's not a total and complete win. It's a the making of progress. I like that.
On that point, can I just say, I do think I wish that idea could be absorbed more and more widely. Um, I am immensely grateful to the people that came before me in my industry. I remember being a kid. So when I went to high school, I just joined and my brother was in upper six, right? And so we would run home from school. It was such a long bloody walk when you're like 10, 11 years old. But he would bring you home at lunchtime and then we would burn some, burn some cod beef burgers in the grill. Once set it on fire and had to have the fire service attend the house. Anyway, and then we'd eat them quickly and then we'd run away. But when we would come home, we'd put the BBC One on, and Moira Stewart, who was actually an actress, not a journalist, was reading the news. Moira Stewart was, to my knowledge, the first black BBC One newsreader. And I would look at her and I would think, somewhere in my brain, oh, if she can do it, oh, maybe I can do it. And she wasn't a journalist. She was a very good newsreader. She was an actress. And these things matter. They do matter, right? But it is only a chip. So seeing all the people that came before me, all the black and brown people who went to university, end up in university environments. I went to university at the time that only 7% of the population went. I mean, God, do you not think I felt lonely? I remember turning up and just being in a sea of people. I remember I did a law degree, sitting in this was in the first couple of days, sitting in the junior common room. And junior common, didn't know what that means. Anyway, and I was witnessing conversation where my peers were talking about how their brothers and sisters or their friends knew each other because they'd been at various balls in the summer. And I was like, I had no idea what the beeping hell you're talking about. I went, can I swear? I mean, I was like, oh no,
Yeah.
I'm a terrible swearer. Okay, mouth like a sailor. I just remember thinking, I have no idea first of all, what's a coming out door? And secondly, I literally don't know. There is literally no one in this massive university who went to school with me. Like, not a single person. Not one. And so that sense of being an outsider was really sort of an outsider on the inside.
Yeah.
Always had it. But I also realized that then somebody recently got in touch with me, actually, who was at university a year below me, an Asian woman. And she said, I remember you. And I remember you in the lectures. And I remember you walking around university. And I remember thinking, it's going to be okay. Even though I didn't feel particularly integrated into that environment.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting lesson.
Yeah, it's really, really lovely. I really like that there was someone who was like, looking up at you and going, "Oh, it's gonna be okay. I've got somebody like," and there's a chain there of, you seeing a newsreader in your childhood and thinking, "I can do it," and her seeing you thinking, "I can do it,"
Yeah.
and there's probably people watching this who are seeing you right now and thinking,
Well, it was
"Great."
really nice. A young black female journalist in the audience came up to me, working in a fantastic title, and said, "Would you mind if I take your address because I am just struggling with so many of the things that you talked about. I don't know if I should stay in the business in you." And I was like, "Okay, well, first of all, that's totally normal.
Yes.
That feeling, it's totally normal. That's fine. That's okay." And I hope that helped her. And I just got my details. I'm going to talk about that more. It's okay to feel that.
Yeah. Good. I am going to turn to another question.
You can tell me to shut up, by the way. I think
Uh,
I'm talking too much.
no, I love it. I could do this all day, but I don't want to keep you all day.
A
Um,
microphone for a while.
yeah.
I think we
Yes.
so
I won't comment on that. What? Um, so, completely unrelated to that topic, um, how can media do more to hold Israel and Israel supporters accountable, in light of what is currently unfolding in Gaza?
journalists can do their jobs.
So what it comes down to, yeah.
I mean,
Just
I've thought about it over and over again.
yeah.
Listen, it's a very, very difficult environment, right? Israel has prevented international media from entering Gaza. They have stopped them entering Gaza. This is a sentence we cannot report enough. That is a sentence that should be said before every single news report that is aired anywhere. Why? Because it means that we have had to leave the conflict that has proved the most deadly to journalists. We've had to leave the reporting of that to Palestinian reporters who are themselves being killed in the conflict, who are themselves victims of missile attacks, of starvation, of a total siege, not once, but twice, who are being shifted from place to place to place, herded as a right wing Israeli politician wanted, herded like cattle around their own territories. We have to say this over and over and over again, right? We have to say contextually, Israel denies that it is committing a genocide. Israel denies that it's committing war crimes. Israel denies that it is starving the Palestinian population. The entire humanitarian aid community disputes that claim and says that it is wrong. The ICJ asked Israel to put in 7 preventative measures against genocide last year. That was January 2024. We are now in May 2025. It has not done them. What would the conclusion be that one would reach? We have to be able to report that the head of UNRWA is talking about massive atrocities, that Tom Fletcher has just pleaded to world leaders to prevent a genocide. We have to say where the weight of evidence is taking us. We have to contextualize.
Yeah. It's
It's
important to
important.
say,
And I know that there are really experienced, brilliant field reporters like Alex Crawford, like Lindsay Hilson, like Lise Doucette, like Joan Bill. They are chomping at the bit to get in and report. And when people are like, I'm going to give Alex Crawford at Sky News a massive big up here because she can't get in, go to her Twitter account and see how she is managing to talk about this conflict. And it is an example to every mainstream media journalist, whether they're a presenter or a producer or an editor or a reporter on the ground. She is so clear in her language, and she will face down bad faith actors who throw false claims of anti-Semitism at her. And she's had a hard time with it.
I can see that she's rightly been on your mind from the way you're
Yeah.
speaking about her. Yeah.
Because again, it's that crack in the ceiling, right? I used to watch her while I was training. I saw her doing the job that I wanted. I remember the first time I met her, I couldn't speak. I was so awestruck.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it, when you meet people that are famous and you have to do things like interview them. It's very nerve-wracking. I just, it's unrelated to anything. Um, yeah, now, in the last few weeks, it does feel like the media is more willing to criticize um, Israel, and Britain, and Canada, other countries are more willing to criticize Israel.
Can I correct you?
Yeah, sure.
I don't think the media is more willing to criticize Israel. I don't think that's what's happened. I think they appear to be more willing. I'm going to talk about mainstream or established media,
Yes.
right? I think they appear, and it was weird. I wish I had my phone with me because there was a particular date where I remember commenting on this. I couldn't have been alone because in like 24 hours, there were like 21,000 likes, like a couple of thousand reshares. It's not that they are more willing to criticize Israel. They appear to be more willing to allow voices that criticize Israel on air.
It's an interesting distinction.
and not to both side the conflict in the way in which they had been both siding it. I would also say that it's a wait and see, because that certainly happened for about 48 hours after Tom Fletcher made his comments.
Mm.
Let's just see what happens in the intervening period. I should also say that there was something I found very uncomfortable about the way the UK media reacted to, again, a very controversial thing to say. Tom Fletcher is an extremely well-respected former diplomat. His speech was really very good. He was obviously working within what the United Nations feels are diplomatic confines in terms of plain speaking or not plain speaking. There is something very interesting about what happens when a well-respected establishment figure gets one of the top jobs at the UN, and how mainstream media elites react to that.
It's an interesting.
Because that's what they were reacting to. They were reacting not just to his words, but to him as an individual.
Yes.
And what does that tell you about race, gender, class, articulation, language, positions of power and influence, and how all of these elites interact with one another?
That's a really good answer again.
Almost like I've been thinking about this.
Yes,
for a while.
it does. I do feel like you've been you certainly been, it's been on your mind of late for
Yeah.
some reason. Not any particular reason. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to take us to a quick fire quiz. I'll explain the context behind the quick fire quiz for those who don't know in a minute. When Novara Media did their coverage of your recent comments to James O'Brien, not asking you to comment on that at all.
It's my
Yeah.
pinned tweet on X.
Oh yes,
You can go read it, and on Instagram.
yes.
Everywhere else, yeah.
But when they were
False
covering it,
accusations, we can say that, because they were false accusations.
yes, yep,
And the fact that I'm legally silenced, you can say that.
yes, rightly so, rightly so. Not rightly so that you're legally silenced. Excuse me, rightly so that you're saying that, because I think it is important to say, and important to say loudly, because it's setting the context much as we're setting the context on Gaza more widely. But yes, when Novara were doing their coverage, they mentioned that they would absolutely love to have you on as a guest. Is that something you're open to? And I'm just curious whether that's something that you would do, because our founder Curtis is going on Novara in a couple of weeks' time. So just curious, really, whether it's something you're open to.
So I was told about this when a lot of people started messaging me, saying, "Oh, they jumped that I can go," which is very sweet. And I went and watched the video, and yeah, I mean, I would definitely consider it, and I would really consider it if they just pronounced my surname correctly. I went to watch it, and they said my surname wrong about 17 times. I was like, you were obviously not listeners to my LBC show where I had to say my name every 15 minutes before the ads. So, yes, it was something I would really consider doing. And I've got to say, I think, the more I watch independent media, the more I watch independent journalism, it does give me hope, actually, because I can see that you're all, working within financial confines, where for many people working in independent media, it's a passion project, that it's incredibly hard work, that you're trying to raise standards. And yeah, I'm really impressed by a lot of what I'm seeing, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I know a lot of us feel like we'd rather not be not be doing it at the end of the day, because or rather not be covering the stories that we're covering, because it's so depressing, covering a lot of the things that we are covering these days. But we're working actually to make Turn Left its own thing.
I'll ask you a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Why? I mean, obviously, media for socialism. I mean, the social media that we've been talking about principally, because we didn't touch on private broadcast media, would like to think of themselves as being impartial, balanced, fair, neutral. I mean, you're very clearly stating your position, aren't you? this is your political perspective.
Yeah.
Um, how do you feel about the concept of impartiality? Do you think it's something that is still a necessary requirement for either A, public service broadcasters like the BBC, and ITV is also a public service broadcaster? Or do you think that for your generation, it's something that it's not a concept that you feel necessarily holds as much value?
Impartiality is an interesting one because so I'm a historian by trade. Both of my degrees were in history. And when it comes to history, there's no objective history. There's no such thing as objective history, and this is something that new historians like really struggle to wrap their head around. Is the idea that there's no like one perspective on one objective truth. There's things which are more subjectively true than others because we can evidence them better. And I think maybe the emphasis needs to be shifted away from the idea of impartiality and rather commentary on power and perspective, and yeah, shifting it so that we're getting a wider range of perspectives, but particularly the perspectives of those who are the most marginalized. And it's Rawls's difference principle. It's the idea that inequalities within society should benefit the least advantaged the most, and the most advantaged the least. I say that should be put at the center of any questions of impartiality. I think that's a that's a goal for impartiality and for new media. And also collective ownership. We run as a cooperative. And I think that's a model that we should be moving towards. So power is more evenly distributed among media organizations. As I said earlier, I'm going to do a quick fire quiz bit now. So the context for the quick fire quiz is that almost exactly a month ago, Sangita got to interview Mehdi Hassan, another hero of mine. I'm absolutely awestruck by all the people I'm getting to talk to and talk about at the moment. It's great. Um, and at
He's a
the
good
end,
guy.
yes, yeah.
I had never met him until that day.
Oh, I thought you knew each other from before.
And I think people think that, if you're in the media, everybody knows each other. Actually, that's often not the case. I'm just watching people just as they are watching or listening to me, right?
Yeah.
And I can say I have met lots of famous people in my life, and mostly it's a bit of a disappointment. I'm just going to say it out loud. Mehdi is not a disappointment. He is a great guy, very warm, very lovely. He had asked me to work with him or about 10 months before I did that interview with him, and it just felt right to do it now. Because it was actually literally the anniversary of my last show at LBC by chance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and he was lovely man.
I
Clever.
remember, yeah, really clever.
Super clever.
I remember watching him debate a Israeli representative. What's the name of anybody can say it? What's the name of the Israeli representative who he debated? I can't. Elon Levy. That's who I was thinking of.
Yes.
Yeah, Elon Levy. And there was,
Quite a few run into it.
yes, but there was this really powerful moment
Yeah.
where Mehdi Hassan had sort of introduced us to the Al-Dos family, who were never given an explanation as to why they were targeted by Israel, their family in Gaza. And Elon Levy, at a point later in the debate, was saying like, I had to run into an air raid shelter, multiple times to avoid these rocket attacks. Mehdi Hassan, it was really powerful, because at the end of one of his points, he just said that I'm glad, Elon, that you had a bomb shelter to go into because the Al-Dos family in Gaza did not. It was just a really powerfully made point.
Yeah.
Stuck in my head. But yeah, it kind of relates to the whole Gaza situation, but also
And of course, Israel benefits from a multi-billion-dollar air defense system, unlike the civilians of Gaza.
relations of power. Yeah, yeah,
An asymmetric war.
contextualizing.
And we need to talk about that as well.
100%, 100%. So with that in mind, sorry, it would go really
So
long.
at the end of that interview,
Sorry.
I pulled out a big sheet and I said, Maddie, we're going to do a quick fire quiz. And he was like, oh God. But he did it, and it was good fun.
Indeed. And so I thought that I would steal some of the questions from that quiz.
Oh God, no.
And
Oh, you're joking.
and ask them modified to Sangita.
Oh my God.
So this is this is the quickfire quiz.
Okay, here we go.
And most of them are either or answers. But they've been reshaped a little bit.
Holy cow.
yes.
Okay, here we go.
So the first one that you asked was, are you a dog or a cat person? So I'll just ask the same one to you.
Dogs.
Dogs?
All the time. Fiercely loyal, sweet, cuddly. And they don't just come to you because you're feeding them.
I love that. So you're stuck in a lift. Who would you rather be stuck with? This time it is Dominic Cummings or Morgan McSweeney.
Oh my God. Morgan McSweeney, so I can interrogate him about why it is that he has led New Labour to be the thing that it is now.
Yeah. I think I'd have to agree on that one. Yes.
I don't think he'd want to be stuck in a lift with me for some reason.
Yeah. You're consigned to a desert island.
Yeah.
And you can only take one box set with you. But this time it is either the complete Star Trek collection or the complete Doctor Who collection.
If the complete Star Trek collection includes the original Gene Roddenberry version,
It does.
every time Star Trek.
Yep.
Yep.
You're a
That's
Star
fine.
Trek fan?
I'm a massive fan. Oh God, I'm such a nerd. I'm a massive fan of the original series.
You're right at home here.
Well, because it was really so. Gene Roddenberry, of course, was this California-based artist. He traveled around the world. Interestingly, he'd gone to India. He'd learned a bit about Vedantic logic, which is the basis of Hinduism. And his vision for the original crew was to have, essentially, it was based on a new world order where you had equality amongst his crew, right? Of course, you could argue it was still a handsome white guy who was Captain Kirk, but nevertheless. And it's also, I think, the first time, it was that first series where, I could be wrong here, it was first interracial kiss.
Marshmallow-based snacks. Again, tea cakes or s'mores, which is your favourite?
Tea cakes. Donuts.
Tea cakes?
Yeah, my husband's from the north. He'd kill me if I said
Oh, yeah.
S'mores are the American.
Yes, yeah, of course. You did say that in the original Quickfire. So you're back at university, but you can only study one subject because you did both law and politics, as I understand it. You can either do law or politics. Which one would you choose?
Politics.
Politics?
Without doubt, yeah. I mean, I think where I did the exam, when I did the degree, I mean, to give you a sense of it, in the final year, I was able to weight my courses, so they were no longer 50-50, and I basically made them 80% politics, and then just did the two courses that I needed to do to qualify to get my part ones, what they call the part ones of your law, your professional qualifications as a lawyer, and then I graduated university and became a typist / office assistant, then started working for free in the media.
I love that because I think we'd all think the same. So you're back on the desert island, but you can only tune into one channel, and unfortunately, this weird
Don't say
network.
GA News.
And you're stuck. You can only tune into one channel. It's either got to be GB News or Talk TV.
What?
Which one would you tune into?
I would probably find something to stab my eyeballs out with. Holy cow. Talk TV.
Okay.
Yep.
I won't ask you to elaborate on that one
I mean,
because that would seem like a really difficult decision.
oh God. Because,
So-
well, in relative terms, I would say the unpleasant right-wing xenophobic rhetoric, misinformation and rhetoric is probably a bit less on Talk than it is on GBs. Yeah.
Okay. So that lift is still stuck.
Oh wait, can I just check? Is Talk TV the one where they had the presenter Mike Graham?
Yes.
Said he thought the concrete grew on trees.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm literally watching Talk TV because that is going to be so much fun.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes, there's some intelligence vetting needed on Talk TV. I'm not gonna lie. So that lift is still stuck. Who would you rather gets in, Kemi Badenoch or Suella Braverman?
Oh, interesting fact. Suella Braverman and I would have crossed paths at junior school
Really?
because she I think is a year younger than me, and so we would have crossed paths at our first junior school. But what happens is her parents, probably having seen the junior school, took her out. I think
Ah,
when she was it's 8, 9, and she then went off to the local private school, and I stayed there, and then went to the comp across the road. Holy cow! Um, oh my god! See, uh,
so
okay. I think I have really said my piece about Suella Braverman in the past.
mm,
So actually, probably Kemi Badenoch because number one, I could keep calling her Kemi Badenoch, and it would really wind her up because she always said, "It's Badenoch. I'm not bad. There's no bad in my name." I've literally read her say this, read her saying this, so that's fun. And also, I would like to know how she has managed to cock up the leadership of the Tory party just so badly. Yeah, and if Morgan
mm,
McSweeney is still in the lift,
yeah.
I can imagine getting on quite well.
Yes, yeah, yes. I can see that. Yeah.
It's a joke, a little joke.
I think there's some truth to that. So, just better sports person, is it Federer or Messi for you?
Federer.
Federer?
Yeah, only because he's a machine, and I've seen him, and I don't really watch. I mean, I don't watch much sport at all. In fact, I don't do much sport at all, which I think is patently obvious to anyone. So, having seen Federer, yeah, I would say Federer.
Go with Federer. Nice. Um, and you've already said you're an anti-monarchist. But again, favorite prince? Is it William or Harry?
Harry. It's got to be Harry.
Harry.
Yeah, I think I'm one of the few people in the country that feel really sorry for him. I think he's a messed up kind of a guy, and he has some really terrible advisors around him. So I have a bit of a soft spot for Harry, I would say.
So that lift is still stuck.
Holy
Currently,
crap.
we've got Morgan McSweeney and Kemi Badenoch in there. This is a difficult one, but like it goes to the next floor, and there's you can either have Jordan Peterson get in or Ben Shapiro.
Holy cow, what? Okay. Oh my God, cannot stand Ben Shapiro. I mean, I'm sure he feels the same way about me. Never met the guy, but I'm sure he
Mm.
feels the same way about me. You know what, weirdly, I am probably, again, one of the few people who actually read Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules back to back on holiday. I mean, if that isn't masochism, I don't know what is. So I would probably say Jordan Peterson because I'm honestly fascinated by the fact, he did a really weird performance during a live panel discussion, didn't he? When he went kind of off his head, and he said it's because he had eaten apple cider vinegar. He said
Yes.
apple cider vinegar, of which you're only ever supposed to have, I think, 1 or 2 teaspoons a day, just had sent him absolutely flying. And I'm kind of just want to meet him and dig into that a little bit, and also ask him why he wrote such a boring book. I mean, the first chapter or so is really quite good because it's kind of if you are a kind of young man who is trapped in his mum's bedroom and spends all their time going down internet rabbit holes and can't get a girlfriend and doesn't use deodorant and lives in a pigsty, he basically says, clean up your room, have a shower, use deodorant, get out more, and just generally be a bit, you know, more friendly. So all of that is, I think, reasonably good advice for the majority of the population. But after that, it really is possibly the most tedious book I've ever read, and I just want to know why. I want to know why no one should be that boring.
You'd like to get inside his head, yeah.
I think it's absolutely obscene for him to write a book that boring and still become a sort of multimillionaire off the back of it.
Yes. With that was to do with the all meat diet, wasn't it? He went on a diet where he was just eating
Well, if anything's going to
meat.
give you bad breath and BO, it's going to be an all meat diet. I'm just saying.
Oh yes, and the toilet trips can't be pleasant either. Like that cannot be good.
This interview is going in a way I never imagined.
Yes,
Anyway,
yeah, yes. But it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And honestly, I could talk to you all day, but I don't want to hold you up because there's probably people waiting to speak to you.
you're welcome, and good luck with everything you do, guys.
Thank you very much.